of you must have known Nandini, by whose name and memory we hold this Smarak Sanglap. You must have remembered her keenness and irrepressible passion about cinema because it is worth a remembrance. An incident always happens by itself. Nobody can deny, defy, nor question the uncertainty and the subtlety of its course and nature by which it can hit upon anyone, like the way Nandini never ever would have wanted to see the end of it all at the other station. Neither do her friends, colleagues and relatives want this to be remembered as a sort of finality or a painful severity, bringing down the curtains to a wellspring of passion and zeal that Nandini was all about. They want the sounds of silence to reverberate and the fond memories to linger on in this way with you and us. We believe one of these days there will come a Nandini, basking in the glory of Nandan, racing down the corridor of Film Institute and poring over the editing table inside a studio of Mumbai. She will be there to behold in her spell of cinematic opinions and evaluations hundreds of cinegoers and film buffs. May this love for cinema live on forever, and there lies the success of the Smarak Committee. Most of you present today must have been here with us for the last 3 Sanglaps. Yet for whom this is the first one, we will leave a cue for your orientation. First year, we had with us
Shigahara, or Woman of the Dunes, which had a fantastic music score. We tried to understand what was this music doing in cinema. What does it do? How has it been done? The composer of the film was Toru Takemitsu. Toru Takemitsu happens to be one of the greatest composers that Japan has produced. He's dead now. I later had an occasion even to meet him in Amsterdam several years later. A variety of experiences led me again and again back to the question, what is music doing in cinema? Why people use music? And I could easily see that there were 2 aspects to this music, very simply 2 simple way one could divide it, 2 different parts to it, or 2 sides to it. One particular side was where the music was being used in cinema as art. It was being composed as art. There were artists working there. And there was another side to the music, where the music was looked upon as something that would help the commerce of cinema. And these were very simple, perhaps very simple divisions at that time, but these came to my mind very early. And when I started looking up in the analysis of musicology about different kinds of music, I came to know that the musicologists who used to think of music in terms of different categories, and these categories have the various ways in which you can categorize music. You can say that there is music from the Vedic times, you can say that there is Mughal kinds of music, or you can talk about the Buddhist era of music. You can perhaps speak about the music between the 2 world wars, or maybe you can say about the second half of the 20th century or something, which is where you categorize music in terms of periods. And you say that one kind of music existed in 15th century, a totally different kind of music emerged in 19th century or something like that. The different times have been actually also looked upon by people in the West as movements in all arts and in all culture. For instance, then you can talk about Renaissance music. You can speak about maybe Baroque music. You can go to Rococo, or you can talk about classical, and then you can go to romantics, maybe impressionists, and so on. That's another way of categorizing it. In India, we had a way of categorizing where we said that one kind of music was Marg, another kind was Desh or Deshi, and that's what our books said at one time. When we talk about these different categories, where does the music in films fit? One wondered. And this was the question. Is it when we are? Is it can it be categorized? Is it possible to categorize it in terms of periods? I mean, you have a film made on the life of Tansen, let's say. Do we have music in that film which is from the times of Tansen? Is it possible to get hold of that music and really use it there? Is it authentic? No, it is not. Obviously not. I mean, you can't have Mukesh singing for Tansen. It's not possible. So what category is it? Do we sort of call it romantic music or classical music, or how do we decide what that particular music is? And is there only one kind of music in all films? It's another question. In order to understand, I think in order to understand music better, in order to understand anything better, we try and categorize and classify and so on. Sometimes it may be wrong to do that, but perhaps the idea of classification has come to us after, in a manner of speaking, after the theory of evolution came. Because we started categorizing the animals, we said, we started categorizing plants and so on. So, is that the way we go on categorizing music in order to understand them better, understand the animals, the plants better? So, should we do that in case of music? I think the musicologists have now come up with a completely different way of categorizing music. And this is relevant to what I'm going to say. What they say now is basically there are four categories that exist in music. This can be used anywhere in the world. They would say that one kind of music, you would say, is art music. The second kind, you would think, and we would categorize as folk music. The third one, you shall call primitive music. And the fourth one, we could call popular and commercial music. Now these are, I think, sort of good categories, although there is a tremendous overlap between the categories. But in order to understand music in films, perhaps one of the categories can be used. And when I started thinking about it, I realized that two of the categories really came in very strongly into the film music. And we could understand film music if we looked at these categories. The categorization is based, obviously, classification is based obviously on the intention of the person who's making the music. If the person feels that he's an artist, what he's doing is an artistic endeavor, attempting to express an artistic way something, then that becomes art music. But if you have an intention actually of reaching out to the maximum number of people, selling it, and in order to sell it to the maximum number of people, you take into consideration the trends at present, and you actually create music which is acceptable to many people, then what you are attempting to do is popularizing your work. And you are actually going into what one would call the category of popular and commercial music. So when I said that music in films has these two sides, it's obvious that these are the two sides. There are some people who consider making music for film as an artistic endeavor. They consider it as a contribution to the medium of cinema, which is able to take contributions from different aspects and different arts. It has been called sometimes a bastard art, because it sort of brings in, pardon the expression, that's what it is called, because it takes in things from many, many different disciplines, as it were. You know, you need art director with visual sense, you need temporal sense, and this and that, you know, various kinds of things, narratives, so there's some kind of literary aspect to it, etc. So it's bringing together all these things. In it, the music also comes in. Contributor of the music, if that person, she or he, is thinking in terms of giving the contribution in an artistic manner, considering himself herself to be an artist, then it is art music. So when I see Toru Takemitsu working and putting across a kind of music in The Woman of the Dunes, I wake up and suddenly say, my God, this is not music that's going to be popular. Because it has no existence outside the film either. So people are not going to buy the records of that particular thing and play it at home for their pleasure. It's something very different. It merges in the film, it heightens the film, it does something extraordinary to the experience of watching that particular film by Keshigahara. So there is an artistic contribution to the film. I can't say the same thing about the songs of Satyam Shivam Sundar. If they are, I'm quite sure Lakshmikant Tagore, I'm going to a snow kind of friend, we've met and talked to each other. If I say to him that it is not an artistic song that Lata sings in it, he will not agree. And what's art? After all, what he has done is artistic contribution. But if you look at the intention, the idea is actually to go out and reach out to the maximum number of people, and obviously the intention is to increase the sales, so there is commerce involved, there is popularity involved. So music in cinema, therefore, obviously has these two sides. One where there is the artistic endeavor, there is the artistic goal that the composer or maker of music has in front of her here. And the other, where of course music being a formalized art itself, it cannot do away with the art component in it, but the intention is actually to go and become popular, go to the masses, become popular. So one realized that there's these two kinds of music, coming back to the whole experience that I had. And I felt that if I were to opt for one of them, then perhaps I should try and do music which is, I should attempt to do at least, try and do music which is the art music part, personally, rather than to go for the popular commercial. That division, mind you, is not as watertight as one would want it to be. There are overlaps and various kinds of overlaps in all categories. The folk music becomes a commercial enterprise today, as we realize, so it's not a separate category anymore. Then, when I understood that this is what is happening, I was wondering, what is it that music does to cinema? Why do cinema and music come together? Why is it that when we look at still pictures, we don't expect any music to be around? Why is it that when we are at an exhibition of paintings, I know that now many exhibitions also use some kind of background music when the exhibition is on today, because music has this mysterious, almost spiritual quality of calming down people. There's a kind of, to use the current jingo word, lingo at present, there is a feel-good thing in music wherever you go. So that feel-good thing connected with music is utilized by people. So I think some of the earliest experiences of that sort were utilized by the Chinese, when the Chinese dentists pulled the teeth out, they played music, I'm told. It used to be very good. You listened to the music, you were so calm that you didn't mind somebody pulling out your tooth. I wonder what kind of music that was. For one thing, I'm sure that music must have made them open their mouths. If nothing else. Anyway, the point is today you have it played at the railway stations, music is played in the banks, in offices, banks especially, or big stores, because when you're listening to that music, you have this very feel-good feeling, and you buy more if you are in a super shop. You look at things and you feel like buying things and owning them. So it prepares you for that kind of mood. If you are in the bank and if nobody is at the counter and nobody serves you, and slowly your temper starts rising, music will calm you down. So people have discovered that the inefficiency of our offices can be to some extent camouflaged by the efficiency of music. You can play some kind of music, so people calm down. So that's where the music makes some kinds of moods. I was talking to you about how, therefore, the music might be used at exhibitions where they exhibit their paintings. You may start liking all paintings. You probably are less critical about the paintings of painters who sometimes might want to offend you, but if there's music, you're not offended at all. I mean, you feel very good in the company of music and stills. But initially, music was not something that went with things that were still, that were static. And if you look at movies, and if you look at history of cinema, you realize that right from the times of Lumiere brothers and whatever films that came to India especially, everywhere, which were called silent films, there was no such thing as silent film at all. All films were always accompanied by music. Even during the silent era, there used to be a small orchestra pit or a place where the musicians sat. Initially, they didn't even look at the screen. They looked at the audience and performed, because they just kept playing something or singing something. I have elsewhere written about this, because years back I interviewed some people who had the experience of making music for the silent movies. There was an example, for instance, of a singer in Solapur. Solapur is a place in Maharashtra which was an industrial town. They had textile mills there. A lot of mill workers. Music for them was very important. Cinema, when it came, silent cinema, when it came to India, such places, it was basically for the people who were of that particular urban class, who could afford to go to a movie but could not afford other leisure kind of pastimes. People who could not afford to go to concerts, could not afford to go to theatre, that is to see plays, to see dramas, as they would call them, the musical dramas and so on. Such people, at a very cheap rate, maybe 4 annas or 5 annas as a ticket, these mill workers, etc., they used to go and sit. The soldiers who were there from the empire, the British Empire, they used to sit, and at their camps they would project the films and they would have some music. So when I talked to this man in Solapur, he recounted that in the 30s, even after the talkies had come, in Solapur they were still showing films which were silent films. And he was in great demand because he would sit in front of the screen and he would have a harmonium and a tabla player with him. And they would together sing songs, popular songs, while the film was on. It didn't matter what film was there. And there were audiences who would send little notes of farmaish, saying that please sing this qawwali or that ghazal. And he said merrily he sang those qawwalis and ghazals. The film went on. Some people came to listen to him and paid for the film. Some people came to see the film and paid for the songs. So it worked very well. I think the idea of commerce and popular music came together at that time. In the United States, we are told that they hired pianists to perform during the silent movies, because, and especially those who played a kind of ragtime honky-tonk music. Those pianists were in great demand, who could really create a rumpus with their piano, keep everyone awake, because the films had this terrible thing of, as it went on, created there was no separation between the projection room and the screen, and the continuous whirring sound of the projector, the sound, sort of sub-sonic sound. It created such a soporific effect. People felt like going to sleep. They used to go to sleep. So in order to wake them up, they employed the pianists who would go on doing bangs and so on. And some people have continued to do that even today. In films, I think, they still use pianists who give bangs here and there. You can see that. So, cinema was never silent. And therefore, when I talk about the music and films, I say that the two have become kind of inseparable because of a common thread or commonality between them of both being temporal, moving things. Music keeps moving continuously in a very imaginary, ephemeral, abstract way. I'll not get into the philosophy of music in that sense, but its abstractness is something that is very difficult to grasp because of the nature of sound itself. The sound itself is something that is so transient that the moment the sound is born, it's dead. You don't realize this very often. All music, therefore, lives in our memory. There is no music in the present at all. I don't know if you realize this. If you very carefully look at music, there is no such thing as music in the present. All music always lives only in our memory. All music has gone into the past and it's there in our memory. And we have a fantastic memory for music. So it goes there in our memory and starts affecting our moods. And as it moves through time, we have a feeling, as it sort of continuously gets into the past, we have this feeling that we are moving forward. And see how ideally it gets suitable, it becomes suitable for a medium which is two-dimensional. A screen in front of you. Unmoving screen with moving images on it. And there probably exists that link between a very abstract, transient kind of medium of music built with sounds and equally transient, fragmented medium of film. So what does music do to a film? When I started thinking about this, I looked at the experience of listening to music as a continuous experience, something that actually takes you constantly into the memory, into your past, constantly. And it's unbroken as far as music is concerned, because even the pauses in music form a part of music. But when you look at cinema, when you see the method in which the film is put together, you have something which is very different. A film, I said, is fragmented because, it is, if you take the smallest unit, it's the frame. And you have 24 frames of it passing across a projector lens with a shutter in between. We all know the technology. It is clawed down, and there is a line in between the frames, and that line is sort of temporarily obliterated from you because the shutter has a stop in between. And there's a flicker, but this flicker is not felt by you. You feel that cinema is therefore a continuous medium because of the retention of the image on your retina of the eye. It's only the retention of image that makes cinema possible, which we know. Then from the frame we go to a shot. From a shot you go to scene. From a scene you go to a sequence. In between there are cuts of various kinds. The image sizes keep changing constantly. You are bombarded by images which may, in the absence of a linking provided by something, in the absence of such linking, they could be really totally irrelevant. How do we make meaning out of irrelevant images one after the other? What happens? If you look at the projector and see what it is doing, it's slowing down the film, frame by frame. But the soundtrack, which is running with it, ever since the sound came to the films, the soundtrack which is running with it is not clawed down frame by frame. There is a safe distance between the operator or the lens from which the operator's image is going out. There is a safe distance between that and the position where the sound is being read or reproduced, 19.5 frames. And there it's running continuously. So one of the main things that music does to cinema, which I realized when I came to know about these things, thanks to my joining the Film Institute and looking at things at close quarters at that time, and reading and thinking about it, I realized that cinema needs music because it's a fragmented medium and it needs this continuity. So music provides to films a kind of continuity which the sound provides that continuity, one could say, but for me all sound is music, so I'll come to that later if need be. But the point is that a fragmented medium gives you an illusion of continuity, not only through your vision, but basically through your ears. And this is why I say again and again that the ear gives us the continuity much more than that. And I have been talking about the film auditoria and the people who go and see the cinema as well as theatre. We call them the audiences. This is something which is very important. Many people don't think about this. We say the films are made for audiences. The audience is someone who actually listens to the thing. It's not seen alone. There are a lot many times when many films make us close our eyes. We realize that too, in a manner of speaking, and just listen to the sounds. But basically it's the continuity which is provided. Then one realizes there's a two-dimensional thing, but there is a world that exists beyond the boundaries of the screen. And how is that world created for us? That world is created by the sounds, by the music. The presence of things beyond the frames that are being shown to us one after the other. They suggest to us that there is life beyond those restricted frames. Seeing is believing, they said. But for human beings, for a long time, seeing was not believing. If we look at the whole human evolution, we realize right from the beginning, when humans started living in small societies, caring for each other, few families living together, they probably lived in caves and in places where they thought they were safe. How did they know that there was world beyond where they lived? Once the sun was down and they were inside a cave, there was no way of knowing the world around. People have talked about this dependence on sound of humans depending on the perception of sound. People felt that there must be sound out there which we can hear. It may be that of a predator, maybe there's a cobra somewhere or tiger somewhere. You couldn't see it. You couldn't see anything at night, but you could hear, and hear at great distance. So the ear became more important. We also have a feeling that all of us hear the same thing, although no two persons see the same. I don't know if you have realized this, because there are always different angles from which you look at things, be it cinema or not. You are looking at things from different angles, live action, live world. This is why Walter Ong, the famous writer who writes to culture, various things, has very succinctly, very beautifully, aptly talked about sound and sight, or sight and sound. He has one little sentence, which is, I think, very, very beautiful sentence, aptly. He says that sight isolates, sound incorporates. So that's very true. And therefore, in cinema, this incorporation, when we actually all sit together, we listen to the same thing and so on, that is what gives us the whole world of sound, the completion to, or the third or the fourth dimension, to the two-dimensional screen on which we see things. This was what I was thinking about when I had started thinking about why music and films come together. What does music do in films, basically? Basically, I'm sure it does all these things. Vision, things that we see with our eyes, has always been to Indians Maya. But to us, Ek Naam Sat Hai is true. We hear the sounds of the name. We are the people who do japa. We go on repeating the names of gods, of dear ones, or loved ones. And we have a fantastic oral memory. We remember music and tunes. So in India, it has a very special significance, music and films, I think. Cinema is magic. It came from magic lantern. Cinema is also realism because it comes from camera, the actual photography. But the combination of these two create a very peculiar sense in our mind of a Maya from Indian philosophy. That's why, Bombay is called Maya Nagari and it's called sort of Maya Lok and whatnot. Untrue to an extent. I think to some extent a value of truth is added to it by music. Because for us in India, we had also a feeling, allow me to sort of go into the writings of Indian musicologists, because they initially spoke of in Chandogyan Upanishad of the Nada Brahma, the universe being full of sound. And they said that the sound was more real than anything else. So the musicians who followed our musicology also believed in this. So I'm giving you different perspectives. It's not necessary that you look at it only from the modern times. Some older people, even before cinema was invented, and before film was known, they had talked about music and what they had said. I think it would be only right for me to talk about this. So all these things come together when we think of music that goes into films. Actually, when we see films, what happens? When we see films, music affects us. Music affects us very much. It has the affecting power to influence your mind. It changes the moods. There are many people who have done research on what it does to humans. Some of the people who have done these experiments have found that it is very difficult to measure, quantify effects of music on the mind. So what they did in America a while back, maybe about 30 years ago, was they had this research where they stuck all kinds of electrodes into the body and they measured the heartbeat, pulse rate, the breathing rate, the perspiration, the changes in temperature, the brain wave patterns, and so on, while people were listening to music, watching the film. And what they discovered was that there were distinct changes that occurred to people when they watched the same visuals without music and with music. The two things were totally different. The entire physiological response to it was different, because at one time we thought that it only affects mind, but I think the psychosomatic thing, the mind and the body are not separate at all. The whole body gets affected. Your eyelids open up more, your pupils dilate when there is certain kind of music, your pulse starts going faster, you have a different body temperature, sometimes the blood rushes to one part of the body, to another part of the body, to the brain wave things change and so on. So there are physiological changes that occur when the music is heard along with visuals. That is the affective power, obviously, of music, because you see the same visuals, once with music and once without music. We'll see what happens. That research was conducted by a person called William Johnson in America, and it has been published in a book on cinema and music. A person, a renowned composer who worked in the West called Irving Bazelon. So music does these many things. Then what happens is that, having known that music can affect this way the audience, obviously the composers and the filmmakers have started using music with a purpose in mind, with a goal in mind. If we look at music from the musicological point of view, we realize that there are different traditions in different parts of the world of music, because music is born of culture, or is born to a culture. This is why there is no such thing as universal music. We have music in India which is quite different from music in, say, Zimbabwe, Zulu tribe, or music in Central Europe is quite different from music in Chennai. Because people live in different cultures and they create different kinds of traditions. If you are making music for a film, do we take music from a particular tradition and use it in films? Can there be the same effect of music as one would find if that music was heard in a certain context in India? I mean, in short, if you went to a concert of Bhimsen Joshi, he lives in Pune, so that name comes very easily to my mind first. If you went to a concert of Bhimsen Joshi and you heard him sing Rag Dalwari, and if that Dalwari created certain impression in your mind, And if you went to a film and you heard that as background music, would the two have the same effect? Obviously not. There will be demands of the visual, the narrative, the acting, everything that goes into a film. There will be a demand to have a certain kind of music, either in order to enhance the effect or do certain other things to which I'll come later. The point is that having no such thing as universal in the musical traditions, the question is always what kind of music can go into films. When I was introduced to a non-Indian once as a man who composes music, he said, I have to meet this one, he's a composer of music. That person said, oh really, what kind of music do you compose? I said, what kinds are there? I asked a question, what do you know about music? And he said, do you compose Western music? I said, no. What do you mean you can compose music which is not Western music? He said, obviously you are the Westerner. And I said, yes, in every tradition people compose music. And it's possible to do that. Because composition of music is where one has a sort of a vision of what sounds and what sequence and what color, what intonations, what they would do and what they would sound like. Having that in mind is what allows you to make a composition. Igor Stravinsky, some of you might, or maybe all of you, I don't know, Calcutta perhaps everyone knows. Some of you might know him or might have known his music. Igor Stravinsky is considered to be one of the greatest composers of the 20th century, a man who fled Russia just around the time, or a little before the Russian Revolution, came, lived in Paris, composed for very famous ballets, worked with Diaghilev, and then went and settled in America. Wrote books on poetics of music. In one place, he talked about whether music has any meaning at all. Stravinsky's verdict, I would call it that. This man was quite authoritative as far as the opinions were concerned. His final verdict was that music has no meaning, it only has structure. I think very interesting to hear. Stravinsky's views may not be agreed upon by everyone, but it's a very, very interesting analysis of what music can do and can't do. He said, music is a structure, it has no meaning. What happens when that music gets into films? Stravinsky's music has been used for ballet. One of the most famous musical scores of Stravinsky has been The Rite of Spring. And the music is now performed without the ballet. It's difficult to perform that ballet, they say. There are not many people who perform Rite of Spring as a ballet. But the entire music score of that ballet is performed quite regularly, challenging one because it has various kinds of rhythms. And people do feel that it has some meaning because there is a name given to it and you get some things out of it. Anyway, coming back to films, what then does the music do in films apart from those four things that I talked about earlier? Of giving continuity, of opening up the third dimension, changing from Maya to this, going away from the broken, fragmented medium. What else does it do? Well, it actually can do several things at the same time. And this refers to a question that was raised by Shamita in his introductory remarks. He pointed out that the cinema structure that is created in time. It's not in space, because when we think in terms of structures, we always think in terms of space. Something as an infrastructure, something superstructure, or a base, and upon it something else. When we start thinking about these things, our thinking is spatial. We think in terms of space. But if you can think in terms of time, then cinema is actually something that is structured with visuals in time. And this is precisely what the music is also. Music also does precisely the same thing. Visuals have some kind of permanence because you can go back to them, as I said. But before we had means of recording, music was not something that you could go back to. So the arts which were temporal visual arts, which is another name for performance arts, always had a structure very similar to music. And you just could not escape it. When the cinema came with the help of technology, there were frozen images that could be unleashed at some point. And, the reel after reel, you could actually look at the visuals opening up again and again. And again in a precise way. The initial efforts were to make music which was live and which changed with every performance. So if you go back to the silent era, the Solapur, remember the Solapur singer who used to take his battered harmonium and sing those songs. He sang new songs every time. And cinema therefore must have at that time films that you saw. And I say in a way cinema, because there were various films that were being shown there. They must have in each show given different meaning to different people. Question of generating meanings by actually creating structures which are different. So when cinema is a kind of a temporal structure, simultaneously there is music as structure. The two come together temporally. I think even when we talk of superimpositions and so on, we talk spatially, we talk of space. But if you can think of them happening temporally, only in time, then you can see that these temporal structures, one with another, one upon another, one under another, one above another, starts creating meanings. And this is what the intense, strong ability of giving you an experience is. So I feel that, music has done a great service to films, to cinema, by actually creating this ability, this possibility of generating different kinds of meanings out of it. Music by its own nature is polysemic, which I have been saying again and again. It is not just one meaning that you get. In fact, even the natural languages are polysemic, which we realize now if you read linguistic philosophy, you come across this thought. Every language is polysemic. So if you believe Derrida, for instance, the French philosopher who's been writing, he's talking about how the language itself subverts language. Everything is, you find the other meaning in it and so on. So quite naturally, music, which is polysemic, also may be able to do that and create and destroy meanings and give you various sorts of things. But the interesting thing, when you have these two structures created, overlapping each other or subverting each other, becoming the infra and superstructures, they have the possibility of giving you a very rich experience. That's where the strength of cinema lies, I think. And cinema, therefore, right from the beginning, used the sounds and the music. When Satyajit Ray started using his own music for films, and several years after that, I had an opportunity to meet him and talk to him. And the interview was published later. One of the questions that I had asked him was precisely what Shamdar brought up today. I said, there is another great filmmaker who has been saying continuously that cinema is music, and I didn't use the word great at that time. I said, another filmmaker. I didn't dare say to Satyajit Ray that there is another great filmmaker. I said, there's another filmmaker who has been saying this, that cinema itself is music, and I therefore shun the idea of using music upon music, and therefore I use very little music. Who is it? And of course I said, Ingmar Bergman. Was this quote from Bergman? Bergman had said this at one point. And I said, when I said this, he in his tall, big, huge voice and personality, I said, and when did you see Bergman? So I heard that, I said, I saw his August Requiem. Where? It hadn't come to India. I said, an opportunity to see it elsewhere. And, Autumn Sonata. I said, I saw it, Autumn Sonata. By mistake, I said, Autumn Sonata. He said, where did you see it? And I said, somewhere else. He said, what kind of music has he been using, you think? So I told him that he seems to use a lot of Bach and so on. It goes back to that. And you seem to compose music afresh. Why is it that you do this? He said, there is a reason. I want to say something which only I could see how it could be said. And therefore, at one point, I think it was Kanchanjunga, that was the first film which made his own music. He said there were several other practical difficulties, like the people I wanted to make music for my film were running around the world giving concerts and things, and they were not available, that I couldn't really find them. But by then he said that I had known precisely what I want, and I was able to do what I want. So I decided to use it the way I want. And obviously, he was very sure that there was this ability of music to enhance the experience of film itself. In the West, Hollywood especially, when they started distributing their films during the silent era, they used to send recommended music to be played for certain sequences along with those films, wherever the films went. And this music was, of course, music printed on sheets, so it was called the sheet music. And there were titles given to this music which went around with distributed copies of films themselves in the boxes, big boxes. So in some places there was something called the title music, which a company would always have its own titles being shown. There would be some music which would be called happy music, some music that would be called somber music, sad music, romantic music, and so on. And these titles were given to each page. And this is where the idea of stock music and the idea of titled music, sort of themes, came into vogue. Because with Hollywood films, these sheets traveled everywhere. And our people started even writing in their scripts, when they wrote film scripts. I've gone through many film scripts, believe me, because not every script that I read could have been made into a film by me, or I could have made music for it. Sometimes they wanted it free from me, sometimes they didn't want me, but yet I read the scripts. So there were a lot many scripts that I saw. Some of these were, full of these instructions in the last column that you have. When you write a script, you have a visual description, and you say, you have the dialogues. There's one soundtrack part of the script where people would write happy music. But you would say sad music. Very brief notes describing music. Knowing that such description actually can generate humor. Still, anyone who reads it only laugh at it, what else. But people still think in terms of this. Look at the Hollywood legacy. For so many years now, people have still thought of happy songs and sad songs, for instance. There are, in film of Bombay variety, you always had Ye Dosti, Ta-ta-da. When it goes pop, 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 then it's a happy one. Then it's Ye Dosti. It's a sad song. Just slow tempo, you make it sad, you make it fast, and you have this kind of idea of the tempos and therefore the moods. No doubt music generates moods for you. But they do it in a popular sense, this is an easy way out, where you do a fast song, call it happy song, you do the same song, sad song. You have to look at it as a cliche popular culture phenomenon. So if we are looking for great music scores, obviously we are looking for something else. I said initially I'll leave that at that because I must tell you that I used to teach music through the 3 years of course of directors, script writers, sound recordists, and so on at Film and Television Institute. It was a long course, and to condense it and to talk about, the body of cinema that has been created in the world is so large. There are great classics, probably hundreds of them around, maybe in thousands with us. Even if we talk only of songs, perhaps 200,000, 300,000 songs have been recorded in cinema, in films in India today. To talk of all the aspects of film music in one lecture is not possible, so I'll just touch upon some and leave some for another time or for you to read or something. There's another way of looking at music. You just look at it as background music and songs. Films have background music and films have songs. The songs, in most cases in films, unless they've been purposely there, are something that can be totally separated from the film. And they are nowadays separated that way. The songs are recorded first. The music rights are sold. And until about 1.5 years ago, 18 months back, I think the crunch came. But before that, the music could be bought by the multinationals, big companies. And they would pay huge sums for the rights of music to market it. And from the money that you got by selling music, you would start making a film. So you engage someone like A.R. Rahman. He would tell you that his 5 songs or 6 songs and an album would cost you so much. I wouldn't know what that figure would be, but what you could guess. And then you could take it to Sony or to some other company, Venus or whatever, HMV, whichever wanted to buy it, RPG or whoever. Most likely Sony. They would buy it And they would advance as royalty something like 11 crores, 17 crores, 18 crores. And then people would start signing up the actors and other people and then start making the film. So the music of the songs was totally separate from films. In fact, at one particular point, about 15 years back, there was a film music recording person who had set up a songs bank in Bombay. You could go to that person, it was a T-series man. You could go to that person and say, I want a cabaret song and I want a qawwali and I want to do it. Do you have it? And you would say yes. How much will you pay? You know, and he would give you a recorded song. You could take that and put it, insert it into a film. So it had nothing to do with the film, the story, the narrative, etc. Unfortunately, even in case of background music, very often this is the case. There are people in Mumbai who would, for 5 lakhs for a commercial film, provide you from beginning to the end title, entire background music, which they have because they have miles and miles of music on reels at home. You count them in kilometers, you don't actually say so many hours. So that stock music is being used. That is a totally different kind of ball game. It's another ball game altogether. When we are talking of art, this is why I said art, popular culture, commerce, you divide these things. When you're talking of art, the making of film music works in a totally different way. You make music for a film, you realize that you have to know the entire film. Usually the making of music comes at the end of the whole film. You have the release print ready almost. The final cut, the release print, all the dubbing, everything has been done so that you know what the shape of the film is. And then you can think in terms of what is to go into it in order to enhance it. And this is where the question comes, what does the music do? It can underline things that are happening in film. It's one way of doing it. Emphasize certain things. It can be a counterpoint. It can bring contrasting elements into the visual, can change its meaning totally by the use of a soundtrack which is saying something absolutely opposite. So you can do underlining, underpinning certain things. You can actually comment on the story, do the job of a Vivek, for instance, that you have in Natak, through music. You can foretell some things that are happening like the Sutranar does, a device which they call leitmotif, which was introduced initially by Richard Wagner, the German composer. He was very famous for his leitmotifs. We had a student who always, at the film institute, who always came late to the class. We used to call him Wagner because he was late motif. There's a pun there. Anyway, so the leitmotif is something that actually reminds you of an incident or a location in a film, and this is done beautifully. You can, there must be Film Society members here, and if you've seen Hiroshima Amour, you would know the use of music there. If you've seen Woman of the Blues, you would know the kind of music that you use there. Music, when it comes along with visuals, you realize that it gets a strength, it draws from the visuals, and it starts talking to you another language. If there was to be, or there were to be ever, a kind of music that one could call universal at all, if there was such a possibility, then perhaps that possibility lies in the music that is made for films. Music in cinema is something, because of the strength it draws from the visuals, can talk to people across cultures. Most other music is in a way culture bound. There is a cultural context. In case of films, and this is why I feel that the modern European movement of Weltmusik, which was the world music, which was being attempted by some people like Esperanto and so on, that particular movement found its practitioners go into making music for films, because their ideas were best utilized by cinema, in my speaking. That's where the music was being used, they found. And you find that people like Luigi Nono or Berio, the Italian avant-garde composers, who made music for Fellini's films, who made music for Antonioni's Red Desert, for instance, famous film, which had this kind of musical score. It talked to people across cultures. It talked in the sense it sort of, you could make certain meanings out of them, or documents for that kind of reviews. Film music, in that sense, liberates itself from the cultural boundaries of the cinema itself. This is why you don't need to go back to the Indian classical music when you are actually using Indian cinema. This is precisely what Rai was saying when he said that he did not want to use tabla because it reminds one of a soiree, a music soiree, kind of a mehfil. So he refrained from using those things, unless he was making, obviously unless he was making a film like Jalsa, that's another matter altogether. But in other kinds of films, he used different sorts of things. Some music for films is made before shooting. Songs are an example. In the case of animation films, there too, music is made before the film is made. From the storyboard, one makes the music. Some things can be added later. But when you have this kind of a situation where you have the music, the job of interpreting the music through the visuals becomes more interesting for the musicians. Because then you have a totally different kind of an agenda if you are making music for a film which is being shot later. All songs are done that way. And I was told that there are a couple of clippings that we have here, which we could see if we had time later, probably after the break. We have to come back to questions. Of different ways in which songs which are recorded before are filmed later. And there is an example from a recent Indian film, and relatively recent Indian, and from a Hollywood film. I think if we can look at them, certain points would become clearer. I suppose this, in a way, gives you a survey of what music can do in films, what music is expected to do in films. One could go into details, and there are many other things that have to be left out. But this is a common feeling that I have when I talk about music in films, music in general, in fact, a little bit. I always feel that I probably left out much more than what I spoke. So, nothing at the moment to add. I think we just come to the right time, 8 o'clock. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Bhaskar. The procedure that we usually follow, we are going to repeat this evening also. We'll have a roughly 10 minutes break. There is tea outside. and our friends here will have slips of paper on which we request you to put in questions that you have for Bhaskar after his presentation. We'd be very happy if the questions relate to the points that he has made rather than go off in various other directions, because you can ask any kind of question to Bhaskar, but not for this evening, because we like to concentrate and focus.
If something went wrong, you loaded another magazine and started right from the beginning, and that was how it had to be. From that, we come to a point now where the MTV technique of a song having shots not longer than 1.5 seconds. That's where we are, and there are some shots which are a few frames actually when you see this. And the whole idea of advertising is included in these clips. So we
we see Roja, that would be the thing. I don't know what the clip is from Hollywood, but Hollywood shot songs in a very different way. And the body image, the head space, the sides, the pans, the tilts, all those things matter actually. For those who are actually connected with filmmaking, they would see the difference and see the two different traditions of making songs and putting visuals to them. That's all we have time to say. You can look at them.